By any reasonable measure, mixed martial arts is among the most challenging sports in the world. Despite the hardships associated with being a fighter, there are a handful of athletes who have gone on to achieve massive success. Still, as we will highlight in this episode, even competitors who have reached the sport's pinnacle in terms of notoriety are far from perfect. To illustrate the previous point, we've decided to take a look at some of the biggest names in MMA, all of whom have 10 or more losses on their professional records. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 great fighters with bad records. Number 10. Nate Diaz. Stockton, California's Nate Diaz has always been an outspoken fighter who wears his heart on his sleeve, a trait that made him a cult favorite during his early days in the UFC. Since making his professional debut in 2004, the Stockton native has defeated standouts like Jim Miller, Anthony Pettis, and Donald Cerrone. Of course, the former Ultimate Fighter would make the transition from cult hero to household name following his UFC 196 clash with Conor McGregor. After surprising everyone but himself by defeating the Notorious One, Diaz became one of the sport's most recognized figures. Despite his box office appeal, the 35-year-old entered UFC 196 with a professional record of 18-10. To be fair, Diaz has fought the best of the best in what has historically been one of the promotion's most challenging divisions. Furthermore, a near-perfect record wouldn't go nearly as well with the younger Diaz brothers' gritty persona. In truth, with his loyal following, Nate Diaz could lose his next 10 fights and would still probably be one of the UFC's most popular competitors. Number 9. Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz is the first fighter to introduce the art of trash-talking to the UFC, which rightfully earned him the nickname the Huntington Beach Bad Boy. His brash nature and ability to sell a fight helped make the former college wrestler one of the UFC's first big attractions. The UFC Hall of Famer is a former light heavyweight champion whose resume included victories over his longtime rivals Ken Shamrock and Chuck Liddell. Though, in fairness, his win over Liddell came several years later when both men were past their respective primes. Apart from that, Ortiz has also secured victories against veterans like Forrest Griffin, Vitor Belfort, and Ryan Bader. Though Ortiz was considered a pound-for-pound great during his prime, wins became increasingly harder to come by during his last several years with the UFC. From December of 2006 to July of 2012, Tito Ortiz went 1-7-1 inside the octagon, accounting for most of his 12 professional losses. After a brief retirement, the now 46-year-old has experienced a career resurgence outside of the UFC, having won 5 of his last 6 fights. Number 8. Randy Couture. Randy the Natural Couture is easily one of the most decorated fighters in UFC history. The former Olympic athlete is a 6-time UFC champion, having held both the light heavyweight and heavyweight titles at various points in his career. The talented grappler holds victories over several fellow legends, including Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, and Vitor Belfort. Despite his notable wins, Couture also has his share of setbacks. Although, to be fair, the majority of his losses came against top-level competition. Of Couture's 11 professional losses, 8 of those were against fighters who have held UFC gold at one point in their career. It's also worth noting that Couture competed well into his 40s and even became the oldest fighter to win a UFC title. Even with 11 losses, Couture more than earned his place in the UFC Hall of Fame. Number 7. BJ Penn. At the height of his career, the prodigy, BJ Penn was easily one of the pound-for-pound best. The proud Hawaiian used his well-rounded skill set to become just the second fighter in UFC history to capture a title in 2 separate divisions. Penn holds signature wins over Matt Hughes, Matt Serra, and Renzo Gracie. Moreover, his UFC 107 victory over Diego Sanchez was nothing short of an MMA masterpiece. Unsurprisingly, the double champ's resume earned him a spot in the UFC Hall of Fame in 2015. Sadly, the lightweight legend's career didn't end well. In fact, Penn's UFC tenure would end with him setting a record no fighter wants to hold, the record for most consecutive losses in the UFC. The former lightweight king would drop 7 consecutive bouts, and most of which were fairly one-sided. Though his skills had clearly diminished, the prodigy continued to convince Dana White to give him one more chance to try and recapture the magic. Finally, after his infamous 2019 bar brawl, the UFC decided to part ways with the Hall of Famer. Penn would finish his run with the promotion sporting a professional record of 16-14-2. Number 6. Dan Henderson. Dan "Hendo" Henderson is a former Pride champion who also competed for UFC gold on 3 separate occasions. The MMA icon defeated some of the best fighters in the game, including folks like Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort, and Fedor Emelianenko. Of course, he is perhaps best remembered for his epic war with Mauricio Shogun Rua, which even earned a spot in the UFC Hall of Fame. In Henderson's case, his 32-15 record doesn't really tell the whole story. The Pride legend fought until he was 46 years old, an age where most fighters would have long since retired. And even in the latter portion of his career, he was in competitive fights with top-level competition. In fact, his last UFC bout was a middleweight rematch with title holder Michael Bisping. While Bisping would end up winning, an aged Henderson gave the champ one of the hardest fights of his career. Fighting past his prime may have had an adverse effect on his record, but it certainly didn't tarnish Dan Henderson's remarkable legacy. Number 5. Rampage Jackson. Quinton Rampage Jackson first made a name for himself competing under the Pride banner in Japan. Jackson's signature howl and aggressive fighting style helped make him one of the biggest early stars in MMA. Of course, his heated feud with Wanderlei Silva, combined with wins over standouts like Chuck Liddell and Kevin Randleman, certainly added to his popularity as well. In the UFC, Rampage is best remembered as the man who ended Chuck Liddell's title reign and headlined several events. Jackson may have 14 losses on his resume, but he has also competed in 52 professional bouts against top-tier fighters from 1999 to his most recent fight in December of 2019. At 42 years of age, Jackson was recently released from Bellator after going 1-3 throughout his last 4 contests. As of now, it remains to be seen what the future holds for Rampage Jackson. Number 4. Mark Hunt. Known for his signature walk-off KOs, Mark Hunt has long been regarded as one of the best knockout artists in MMA. Over the course of his career, the Super Samoan has put away stars like Frank Mir, Roy Nelson, and Derek Lewis. On top of that, he also challenged Fabricio Verdum for the interim heavyweight title at UFC 180. Despite finishing several legends of the sport, Hunt holds the distinction of being the only fighter on this list with a negative record, which currently sits at 13-14. Although Hunt is an exceptional fighter on the feet, he never really put much effort into developing his ground game, which would account for 7 of his 14 losses ending by submission. On top of that, Hunt has often found himself at a disadvantage in terms of height and reach. While his record may not be the most appealing, Hunt is undeniably one of the best fighters to compete in the UFC. Number 3. Frank Mir. Frank Mir holds the distinction of being the UFC's longest uninterrupted tenured fighter, having competed for the organization from 2001 to 2016. He also holds the heavyweight record for most finishes, with 13 to his credit. During his heyday, Frank Mir submitted former champions like Brock Lesnar, Tim Sylvia, and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. That said, his most impressive accomplishment was returning to the octagon after a life-threatening motorcycle accident and recapturing the heavyweight belt. Though Mir was an all-time great heavyweight in his prime, he has struggled to get his hand raised over much of the last decade. In fact, the submission specialist has lost 8 of his last 11 fights, bringing his professional record to 19-13. Now 41, Mir hasn't officially retired just yet and is currently a free agent. Number 2. Alistair Overeem. Kickboxing specialist Alistair the Demolition Man Overeem is a heavyweight legend who's held championships in promotions like Strikeforce and Dream. Moreover, he made history by becoming the first man to have held world titles in both K1 kickboxing and MMA simultaneously. The talented heavyweight also made quite a name for himself in the UFC, where he defeated several former champs, including Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, Junior Dos Santos, and Fabricio Verdum. Overeem also fought for the heavyweight crown and headlined several events. Remarkably, during a career that began in 1999, Overeem has only lost 3 consecutive fights once in his career in the mid to late 2000s. Other than that, Overeem has been incredibly consistent over the course of his 67 pro fights, in which he went 47-19-1. Despite his consistency, the UFC decided to part ways with the heavyweight legend this past March after losing to Alexander Volkov by TKO. Number 1. Jorge Masvidal. Given how well known he is today, it's easy to forget that Jorge "Gamebred" Masvidal spent a large portion of his career in relative obscurity. Sure, hardcore fans have long known about the scrappy Miami native for quite some time. Though he had a long history in combat sports, Gamebred was 34 years old before he achieved superstardom. Masvidal's meteoric rise, of course, came after landing his famous flying knee on Ben Askren, which resulted in the fastest KO in UFC history. He then solidified his status as a top attraction by defeating Nate Diaz for the BMF title in November of 2019. On top of that, he also defeated fighters like Darren Till, Donald Cerrone, and Michael Chiesa. His unique persona, combined with his entertaining fights, have made it easy to forget about his 14 professional losses. It's also worth noting that of those 14 losses, 5 were via split decision. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.